that we can put forward projects. So that's a little unusual of a short turnaround compared to normal grant programs that you see come out of SANDAG. And here is a timeline just to, I've been coming before you with a lot of different things related to our housing program, so I'm hoping to try and make things clear as we bring each item before you. But again, as I said, last year we talked to your planning directors, understood what do they want SANDAG to do to partner with them to help them be successful. And that was in part, what we heard was those, grants are a great opportunity for your cities. And so we brought before the Regional Planning Committee as well as the Board of Directors last year in November, the call for projects and the evaluation criteria that was going to be put into the application for cities to be able to receive that funding. And thank you all for approving that on November 19th. We wanted to make sure, though, that we were still communicating and making it clear to jurisdictions how they could fill out the applications, questions that they may have. And so we held a workshop on December 7th to really answer all of those questions and kept the question opportunity open for quite several more weeks as we were getting into the holidays to make sure that they still had an opportunity to ask questions and have SANDAG staff respond to those questions before the applications were due in January of this year. Even though it says, I realized 2021, it was actually January of 2022, and February is when our grants team ended up doing the review of those applications to make our recommendations that we brought before Regional Planning Committee and that we're bringing here to you today. So I'd now like to give it over to our grants manager, Jenny Russo, to talk through the awards.
Good morning, everyone. As shown on this map, we received 8 applications representing all of the subregions within the county. 8 of the 8, 7 of them are being recommended for full funding. The one that is not shown on this map is the City of Escondido. Their project, we worked with HCD staff, and then they determined that it was ineligible for funding through the program because they didn't think it accelerated housing directly. But what we've done, we have a smart growth incentive program, call for projects that's open, just closed actually a couple of weeks ago. So we're working on funding that application through the smart growth incentive program. So just switching it over from the HAP program over into our smart growth incentive program. On this slide, you can see here's a table of the various applications that we received. The application awards will range from $180,000 all the way up to the maximum award of $500,000. So the total here is about 1.9 that we'll be awarding out to the different jurisdictions within the region. So the recommendation before you today is the Board of Directors is asked to approve the proposed funding recommendations for the Cycle 1 Housing Acceleration Program call for projects. And that concludes our report, and we'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Well, this is all very exciting. Thank you for the work and the presentation. Do we have any virtual or in-person public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any in-person public comments, but we do have one virtual. Mike Bullock, you can begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Board members and Chair, it's good to see a continuation of this from the last time that was presented. It looks like progress is being made. And I did have a comment about how car parking is so important. So I wish that were part of the criteria that's being used. Some of the projects that you mentioned sound very good, the ADU ordinance, the density ordinance. And I would say that the off-street parking ordinance needs to be reconsidered and improved. And as I said, if you're going to do housing, apartment complex, for example, how much parking are you going to need? And how are you going to have people pay for that parking? Is it going to be unbundled? And it certainly should be. However, simply unbundling the rent for the parking from the overall rent, while it's a step forward, and I would never stop something like that. That would be immoral, really, because there are people that are trying to put food on the table. And you never mentioned that, so I assume you care. I certainly care. But on the other hand, that's pretty half-baked. That's not a good system by itself. what you need. And the reason is because the neighborhood won't like it. They'll say, well, they're going to park in our neighborhood. You know, they're going to save the rent and put food on the table, but we don't like their car in our neighborhood. And that's kind of where San Diego is. San Diego can't really grasp the idea that this is a little more complicated than that. And that's where the dividend account parking comes in, and you could use that. And so these sums of money are not large, but they could help people do planning to reconsider, what they're doing. I'm sure there's plenty of smart people that work for the city of San Diego, the staff, if they were told that, we want to handle this problem completely. We understand the neighbor's concern, and but we definitely don't want to just force people to pay for car parking that they're not using. Or we also want to charge the guy that has plenty of money and has 3 or 4 cars they want to park them there. I mean, we want to give people more choice over what happens to their money, but we want a comprehensive view that protects the neighborhood. And so this is the kind of thing, because parking and housing are all tied together. And so I'd like to see that the staff recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you, and Chair, that concludes the public commenters.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to in-person member comments and then virtual member comments. So Mayor Gasterland.
Great, thank you. It's wonderful to be here in person. I wanted to say thank you to the Sandag staff and to all of you for this $225,000 for Del Mar for housing. It represents 1% of our annual budget. We're tiny in Del Mar, and we must put 54 housing units on the fairgrounds as workforce housing. If we cannot make that happen within 3 years from December, we will have to put those 54 units on the North Bluff. If we can't put them on the North Bluff, we'll have to put them on the Staver property, which is the 6.5 acres that are pretty open, that are just above where the big bluff repair happened. So we're tiny in Del Mar, we're coastal, we're strapped for space, and we thank you very much for this $225,000.
Good luck with the fairgrounds. Yes. Hold on a second. We have the vice chair. Go ahead, Mayor Gloria.
Thank you, Chair. I just also want to echo the appreciation to staff for these recommendations. And from a regional perspective, I think that our member agencies put forward some really exceptional applications. And I appreciate the desire to engage in the housing conversation from a regional perspective. No one city can solve our region's housing problems. We all have to be in it together. And kudos to Mayor Mento for what looks like to be a very large project that could really drive some change. The ADUs in multiple cities, the compliance with Senate Bill 9. I mean, there's a number of things here that I think are meaningful. Obviously, I'm partial to the city of San Diego, and I want to thank our planning staff for putting forward 2 things that are important to my administration. One is more regulatory certainty. I recognize permitting takes too long in our city, and this is an attempt to try and smooth that process to make sure that there's more certainty, not of outcome, but of time frame. And then secondly, the desire to better utilize public assets. We recognize land costs are huge drivers in the eventual price that is paid by the consumer. When we look at some city-owned properties, and we have many of them, that could have a better life, not just serving the city, but also providing a needed housing, particularly housing for working and middle-class people. I'm thinking about libraries that are often 1 story, but could have multiple stories of housing above it. Just imagine having a librarian actually living in the neighborhood they serve in. Dare to dream, right? Well, we want to do that in the city of San Diego. This grant will make that more possible. And I'm grateful again to staff for considering this, as well as to my colleagues on this board for putting forward regional solutions to this enormous problem that needs our attention. So with that, Chair, I believe you're looking for a motion. I'm happy to move the recommended action.
I'll second. Del Mar.
Okay, thank you. Well, Councilmember LaCava first, and then we'll go to Mayor Mento.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to build on Mayor Gloria's comments. It is exciting that Sandag is getting involved in a regional conversation, but allowing each individual city to figure out how to deliver the arena numbers that we're all required to do. And it's exactly these kind of programs that help jumpstart some of these conversations. So I too want to thank Sandag for your good work on that. And as Mayor Gloria said, to our amazing staff at the city of San Diego that put these applications together, that will help us. I couldn't agree more with Mayor Gloria in terms of the importance of us being able to use our publicly owned land. That is one piece of the puzzle that we can take out of the complexity of being able to fund projects, is by using our publicly owned land. And I also want to recognize just the pivot that we've done regionally here, the work that the mayor's done with this Bridge to Home program that he announced earlier this week. And kudos to the MTS and county for putting forth their publicly owned land as way to deliver more housing. So this is a great start for a very complex conversation. I know a lot of us individually have very difficult conversations with our constituents in terms of being able to deliver housing, but I think we have an amazing team effort to be able to do that. So very grateful for all this good work by us collectively and individually. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Minto.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I like the discussion about publicly owned land and being able to do something with that. For instance, Santee, we don't have a lot of publicly owned land. So this actually gives us an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the zoning of the privately owned property and making sure that we're all thinking outside the box. And because we know everything from, 375 to you name it, about, fixing the climate and doing things of that nature. And so by thinking outside the box, we can have a little bit more dense population, reduce the amount of people that need to drive cars, because like, for instance, the project here is near our trolley center, and I think it's going to make a big difference. And I want to thank Sandag for, giving us amount of money that we otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to do this. And I think it's a lot like Mayor Gasoline, you get things that you need to cram into a small space, and where do you figure out how to do that? And quite frankly, we don't always have the money to figure that out, and this gives us that opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you so much. I want to give a special shout out to Tuari and her team. This is how we get the funding into the hands of the policymakers who can say, yes, we have the jurisdictional prowess, the buy-in from the community. And if we don't, we can share what those opportunities are. We can get the right developers in our spaces. And so special shout out, I think, and as was shared, this is cycle one monies. So we hope to be able to do this more as a regional board. So let's get in those grants and the applications from our colleagues, because this is a regional approach to getting to our housing allocation numbers. We have to be bold. We can't just say, not enough space. But if this, then this is how we're going to find that solution. So money definitely helps, but I have to say that it's the bold attitudes and also to the willingness of my colleagues around this dais and the virtual dais online. But thank you again to the entire Sandag team.
Chair, I have some questions for staff.
Yes, Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask staff, Troy or Jenny, you mentioned how this program may coincide with our work helping to meet our RENA numbers, but we have other requirements as to whether it be our climate action plans, SB 743, and a number of other things from the state, as well as our regional plan, Series 14 in our regional plan calling for more development of housing close in and not in our rural areas. Does this program have a means to encourage that through its this grant program to encourage cities to do that, and how would that work?
Thank you very much for the question, Vice Mayor Shu. So yes, we are actually thinking just of that and how we can bring forward and collaborate on both the climate goals that we have as a region and individually at the cities where you have goals for your individual climate action plans, and tying that together with our housing elements and the goals. And so part of the evaluation criteria in the application to receive these funds, we did have different criteria in there related to having a climate action plan in place and sustainability goals. And today we're focused on the REAP 1 funding that came from the state, the REAP 2 program that I came to the board on the 25th to ask for permission to apply for those funds. The state is also embedding into their program, really integrating reducing vehicles, miles travel, greenhouse gas emissions, as well as encouraging infill housing development. So I think that, as we continue to do this, we had taken that proactive approach here locally with our application and evaluation criteria first. And now as we're seeing, the state is actually even taking that approach with the second round of funding that they're giving to MPOs.
Great. Does that include unbundling the parking in terms of, that's one of the methods that hopefully more cities are going to consider in how to reduce the vehicle miles traveled and have a cost savings and equity issue?
We can certainly look at that, and we haven't put forward, as Mayor Sotelo Solis said, this is cycle 1 of the Housing Acceleration Program. When we develop cycle 2, we will bring the evaluation criteria and all of the things that will be included in that, and that will be an opportunity for you to weigh in, but we'll take that as a comment for consideration and that to bring back to the board.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the great partnerships with the cities. We really appreciate that from staff. This is exciting, so let's go ahead and have a vote. Oh, Supervisor Lawson-Remer's hand, I see it. Did you want to
Thank you,
comment?
appreciate it. Yes, I did. I think I just want to echo everyone else's comments of how grateful I am for the really wonderful leadership from staff. And certainly my colleagues at the county are very much looking forward to putting the plan into action and grateful for the grant support. And I think this is just a wonderful collaboration. So thank you, staff, and thank you to everyone for making this happen.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to our Executive Director for a quick comment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Wari and Jenny. Great work. I just want to remind the Board of Directors that, and Supervisor Rimmer and chairs a housing subcommittee that's really going to take this discussion into the next level. So we're talking about, we are going to get $43 million from the state. We're also going to add to that our local fund about $40 million. So we're talking about almost $100 million program, incentive program. Obviously, you're in charge of land use. Sandag doesn't have any land use authority, but we want to make sure that you're provided that money. If you choose to do that, what the criteria said, that would be great. So I just want you to look forward to a more discussion from the subcommittee about a much bigger program, probably the biggest in the state in this regard.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Yes.
For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Yes.
For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
The County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Yes.
For the City of Del Mar, Councilmember Gasterland.
Yes.
For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
The City of Escondido is absent. The City of Imperial Beach is absent. For the City of La Mesa, Vice Mayor Shu.
Yes.
For the City of Lemon Grove, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Aye.
For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, yes.
For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Thankfully, yes.
For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Yes.
For the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you. And that item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Okay, thank you. So next we are on to item number 8, which is the revolving line of credit. And I know that Don will be giving the presentation, so I'll hand it over to you, Don.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair and board members. It is nice to see everyone in person. I'm Dawn Batiste, the Innovative Finance Director for Sandag. And the item I'm bringing before you today might seem a little familiar, and that's because in March 2021, I was before the board asking for approval to increase our commercial paper line of credit by $100 million. So today, what I'm bringing you is a change in direction, moving away from the use of the commercial paper program for this increase, and instead looking at a $100 million revolving line of credit. The new revolving line of credit would again be a flexible source of funds that will help position Sandag to compete for the state and federal funds by having match or leverage available in the near term. And this is really important because new state and federal programs are issuing calls for projects this year, and more money than ever is expected to be available. Any use of these funds would follow our traditional budget process. And so today I'm going to be quickly moving through an overview of the transaction. So the overview will cover our financing team, why we're moving to this line of credit, the size and structure, some information on our debt service coverage and credit ratings, and a quick review of the documents. Our team includes members of your Sandag team here, Andre Dujan, our CFO, John Kirk, our legal counsel. Of course, I'm on the team as well, and Betsy Blake, our senior legal counsel. Our financial advisor is Public Financial Management, or PFM. Peter Schellenberger was instrumental in this transaction, as well as our counsel from Stradling, Brian Forbath, and Cecilia Dyba, and our commercial bank, US Bank, Ashley Martin. So why are we moving to a revolving line of credit? Essentially, we're moving this way because it's cheaper in the long run. So a combination of a lower unutilized fee, that's the fee that we pay for basically the whole 100 million, the amount that's not drawn, is significantly less than what we would pay for the commercial paper program. And current interest rates make the terms very, very favorable to move this way. So for those reasons, that's really why we're moving away from the commercial paper into this revolver. This will be considered a 2022 Series I revolving line of credit. It is tax exempt on the subordinate lien, the same as the commercial paper program increase that we brought to you, with a not to exceed amount of $100 million. This by commercial practice does not require credit ratings, but we always are aware that any debt we issue can have a perceptual impact on our credit ratings. So we like to do a quick review of where we are. We have our high credit ratings on our debt program, senior lien AAA, and our current subordinate lien has AA ratings. We disclosed last year in our 2021 financings that we intended to extend this commercial paper, and it did not have an impact on these high ratings. So the documents that are attached to your report today include the memo from our financial advisor, our resolution, the fourth supplement to the subordinate indenture, and the actual credit agreement itself. The memo outlines just an overview of the agreement and provides you with a current look at our debt and our strong coverage ratios. That's included in your report as attachment 1. The resolution authorizes the issuance of the revolving line of credit, and it approves the fourth supplement to the subordinate indenture and the revolving credit agreement. That's included as attachment 2. Attachment 3 is the fourth supplement. It supplements the master indenture, and it sets forth all the repayment provisions with respect to this revolving line of credit. And then finally, the agreement itself in its near final form is included as attachment 4. So in terms of our next steps, by the week of March 28th, we would execute a loan agreement. I know the report itself has a note in the schedule regarding consent from the Build America Bureau that was required under our TIFIA loan. We did receive concurrence from the Build America Bureau to be able to move forward with this transaction. So today, the Board of Directors, acting as the Regional Transportation Commission, is asked to adopt Resolution RTC 2022-8, authorizing a revolving line of credit up to $100 million, and the execution and distribution of the documents in substantially the same form as attached in attachments 2 through 4. That concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dawn. I'm going to call on public comments first and then go to board comments, Mayor Mento. So do we have any public comments, Francesca?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any in-person or virtual comments on this item.
Okay, Mayor Mento.
All right, this might sound silly, but I know that staff is always thinking about how they can save money. Is a $100 million line of credit enough?
So, we've modeled the current budget and the program and then looked forward to our potential line of our slate of competitive projects. And yes, I believe $100 million would be enough. We have an existing commercial paper line that's drawn to about the $50 million level. So we still have about $50 million left on that. We have asks that the board has approved for that commercial paper line, which is why actually we're coming to augment it with this revolving line of credit. But this is short-term money to get us through near-term times. And the modeling is showing this is sufficient for the time being.
Okay, well, one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about this, in our cities, we always do bonding, for instance, in order to get the work done now and then pay later, so to speak. And this is very much like doing the same thing with all the hassles and heartache, so to speak, to go along with bonding and the time. Would that be fair to, describe it that way?
Let me ask Andre, in terms of the current need, we are looking at some short-term needs, and so bonding is more of a long-term product.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, we do bond generally every couple of years, and you're right, it takes a lot of work to do it. So generally, we issue commercial paper in tranches of 10, 20, 30 million, get up to a level, and then generally take out the short-term commercial paper with a longer-term financing. So you're correct in saying that, long-term bonding is a lot more complicated. So this is kind of a short-term vehicle for us.
Great, thank you.
Given your enthusiasm for the topic, is that a motion?
Affirmative.
Affirmative. Okay, we have a motion. Okay, great. We have a second, so let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Yes.
The City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas. Mayor Salas, I'm sorry, could you repeat your vote for me, please?
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Yes.
For the City of Del Mar, Councilmember Gasterland.
Del Mar, yes.
For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
For the City, the City of Imperial Beach is absent. For the City of La Mesa, Vice Chair Shu.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, the City of Escondido is also absent. For the City of Lemon Grove, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, yes.
For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Council President Elo Rivera.
Council President Elo Rivera is absent. This is Councilmember LaCava. I vote yes.
Thank you, Councilmember LaCava. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much. And that item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have item number 9, which is an update from Melissa and Mary Kay on the Salaries and Compensation Action Plan. So I will hand it over to you, Melissa and Mary. And Andre.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. Andre and I come as a package this morning. I know you saw us together earlier this morning. So as you noted, he's joining me for this presentation this morning. And you also mentioned that this is our fourth update to the board on our compensation audit action plan. And the content that we're covering today is the items that management completed and submitted to the independent auditor at the end of December, covering the last quarter of 2021. So excuse me. So as background, during prior progress reports that we've brought to you, and hopefully with this update today, we hope that we've demonstrated that management is taking our response to the compensation audit seriously. For more than 12 months now, we've worked diligently, we've worked collaboratively to address the 27 actions that were noted in the action plan. And as the executives responsible for implementing the plan, Andre, as well as John Kirk, and I have brought together our teams, taking a real cross-functional approach to the action plan, including our finance group, payroll, legal, human resources, as well as risk management. I also wanted to mention that we have collaborated extensively with Mary and her team in completing many of the items, receiving feedback, guidance, and input along the way. The current status of the plan, referring to attachment 1 of your report, which starts on page 119 of your online agenda package. You'll note that there are 26 fully shaded pink circles. And what this means is that 26 of the 27 items have been completed. The one remaining item is currently scheduled to be wrapped up by June 30th, and we're currently on track to do so. So the report that we have for you today, as I mentioned, really focuses on items that were completed between September and December last year. There were 11 items, and Andre is going to talk about a handful of those. I'll cover the rest. But the work broadly falls into 3 categories. It's policies and procedures related to administering our compensation program. It's also the documentation of practices for maintaining our salary ranges here at Sandag, and a consistent use of employee job titles throughout our systems. And finally, documenting the agency's recruitment and selection practices. So with that, Andre, I'm going to take it over.
Okay, thanks, Melissa, and good morning, everybody. So several of the actions that were completed by the payroll, finance, and HR teams are recommendation for the compensation administration part of it. The actions, as noted on the slide, relate to the compensation administration. So the first action, we obtained acknowledgement in severance pay and procedures, which is per our board policy 17, the delegation of authority by the CEO, general counsel, and the manager of human resources. These acknowledgements actually tie back to the policy updates that the board adopted back in June of 2021. There were also recommendations from the comp audit that we strengthen our policies related to severance pay and ensure that appropriate staff understand these requirements. So an attachment 2 to this report, the acknowledgements from Hassan, John, and Rachel, basically our CEO, general counsel, and our HR manager. So the next set of actions to develop and formalize procedures for reconciling the annual compensation adjustments that the board approves in the budget to the amounts awarded to employees. So these actions are related to the findings from the audit that the cost of compensation adjustment provided to employees were not consistent with the amounts approved by the board as part of the budget. So the human resources and payroll departments have increased information sharing when processing pay increases, and a full reconciliation is completed to demonstrate consistency with the approved budget, and attachment 3 further describes this procedure. The next set of actions is the improved overall payroll-related processes and procedures, including allocating lump sum merit pay and special reporting compensation. And in general, these actions address findings from the audit about the need for additional clarity about procedures, including documentation of the various practices used by payroll for the administration and processing of comp adjustments, And again, these reports are attachments 4 to 6. We confirmed also that we are properly recording these transactions with our independent outside auditors, and we have further documented this in attachment 7 to this report. And so the last action, the obtain acknowledgement from employees with payroll functions that they have reviewed and understand their roles and responsibilities relevant to their job functions. Again, this action supports the improved documentation of processes and procedures to ensure awareness and understanding by the finance teams. And a sample of this acknowledgement is attachment 8 to this report. So, before I turn it back to Melissa, I really want to thank and recognize the hard work by the HR team led by Rachel and the payroll team led by Heather, who really took OIPA's comments and recommendations seriously. And through their collaboration, I think we have really accomplished the goal of documenting the important procedures. Melissa?
All right, thanks, Andre. And I wanted just to wrap up a couple more of the items that we completed by that December 31st deadline. These were items that were really completed by the Human Resources team. So as part of Action 7.1, staff created a new administrative policy that documents the practices that we currently use for maintaining our salary ranges. This has a couple of components to it. It includes engaging with our compensation consultant to perform market studies on a regular basis, typically every 2 to 3 years. And in those years that we don't do the market studies, we are engaging with our compensation consultant to do some general market research about conditions and perhaps support recommendations to be incorporated typically into the program budget. The policy and procedure guide, which is attachment 9 in the agenda package, also outlines the role that you as the board of directors have in approving the classification and compensation table on an annual basis. And then we have Action 8.1, which reflects a commitment that we made as part of the action plan to consistently use employee classification titles instead of their working titles throughout all of our agency systems, so that the policy procedure guide has been developed and also has been acknowledged by those who have responsibilities for that commitment. And finally, the third major item that the Human Resources team completed toward the end of last year was to review and update our documented practices for our recruitment and selection program. As the team continues to look to the future, they'll continue to research and implement any new practices that help us better attract and retain the caliber of talent that I know we all need here at the agency. And then just to wrap things up here and then perhaps turn over to Mary. So Andre and I really appreciate the opportunity this morning to share these updates with all of you. And before wrapping up, I mentioned, I believe earlier, that there is one last item remaining in the action plan that is an activity that all employees will be undertaking to update and develop job descriptions. We are at this point on track to have that completed by June 30th and expect to come back to you soon after that and report on the progress there. But with this, Chair Blakespear, this wraps up our report. Andre and I are happy to answer any questions that you or the board may have.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any public comments, Francesca?
No, Chair, we do not have any in-person or virtual public comments on this item.
Okay, let me see if we have any public comments from the board members who are here. I don't see anybody wanting to speak. So I would entertain a motion.
We got one over here.
Oh, yeah, okay. Councilmember Zito.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that, and thank the staff, Hassan, your team, Melissa and Andre. As we're all aware, this particular audit, it started out as being a little bit rocky, and it's been great to see the collaboration. And in particular, Mary Kay and her team have been very good in verifying the follow-up, and it's been great to see that these actions are getting completed in a timely manner, and I think the organization will be better for it. So just as, representing the chair of the audit committee, true thanks to you and your staff for being collaborative and cooperative in this effort, and true thanks to Mary Kay and her team for doing such a great job and digging into this and finding the right way to go about improving our processes. And
thank you for your comments as chair of the audit committee. We appreciate that and your service. And I do see that we do have one virtual hand raised. Anyone else want to speak in the boardroom? No? Okay. Mayor Jones.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that our auditor and her team were satisfied with the progress. That's just my only question. I think I saw her, that she was there.
Go ahead, Mary Kay.
Yeah, so I think we forgot 9B, but that's okay. So 9B is the follow-up, and there was a report provided to the board. Good morning, Chair Audit Committee, Zita, it's nice to see you.
Well, wait, I think we're going to 9B after we conclude 9A.
Okay,
so
because last time we did it together and then answered questions, so I thought maybe that's why.
Well, so 9A is just information, so let's now move to 9B, and you can address Mayor Jones's question since there's no action needed.
Perfect.
So we'll officially move into 9B, and it's all you.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So this will be pretty quick. There was a report issued. We did review all 11 items. This was sort of a much easier review than the past reviews. It was really just looking at policies and procedures that had either been created or updated, in addition to the acknowledgement letters around training, which I think was a really important aspect, is much of the times we create policy and then we don't train around those policies. And so they often don't get followed because there's just a lack of understanding that they're even there. So those acknowledgements around the training and that the policy exists and understanding that was really big. All 11 items checked out. Everyone did as they were committed to do and within the timeline they were committed to do it. And I am happy to report that they were successful in these 11 items and look forward to seeing the last big one in June, which is one that I will be really happy to see because it's something that I wanted since I've gotten here and recognized as being needed. So it's awesome that it's going to happen. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. And we know you also have the next item, which is item number 10.
Yes.
So I don't see any hands raised from anybody. So, Mayor Minto, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for looking at all this, and I'm going to put on my old law enforcement hat now and say about policy as it relates to finance. Many times, crimes can go unaddressed, unpunished, specifically, for instance, embezzlement, because courts don't like to hear cases where there was no policy that prohibited people from either helping themselves to something as simple as the coffee fund to larger issues. So for us to have a comprehensive policy, especially related around finances, I think it helps us a lot better. Not that I'm looking to prosecute anybody, but I think it just makes it a lot cleaner, a lot smoother. So thanks.
That's great context from your life. Thank you for sharing it. The coffee fund. That's a desperate person, yes. Okay, well, thank you. So let's now move on to item 10 itself, which is purchase card operational and system control review. So we'll hand it to you, Mary.
Thank you. Hello again. So I will start this discussion off and then I'll hand it over to Mike. The purchase card review, just as a reminder, was part of the audit plan for fiscal year 2021-22. We're getting ready to do another audit plan for the new fiscal year, so I'll be reaching out to all of you board members to set a meeting with you to have a risk discussion that helps form this next year's plan. One of the risks that were identified, both from discussions with management and with board members, but also an inherent risk for any government agency, is the purchase card and the use of purchase cards. So this review came out of our audit plan. And the principal auditor on this review was Lloyd Carter, and the main auditor on the review was Michael Ryan. And so Michael, I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to go through the findings with you, and then we'll all three be able to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, Board of Directors. As Mary stated, we did a purchase card operational and system control review. I'm sorry, is this to control the slides? It does? Okay, cool. Oh, great. So yeah, our scope period were transactions dating from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th of last year. Our objectives were to review Sandag's management of purchase card, review Sandag's operational processes and system controls to ensure policies are consistent with the federal and state regulations and other applicable laws, rules, and regulations, verify that the controls are sufficient and consist of supporting documentation, and assess Sandag's ability to track and obtain sufficient documentation and keep good records of those processes and controls that support the adherence to said policies and procedures. We had 4 findings. The first finding we noted was there was inadequate procurement card policies, procedures, and lacking system controls. To clarify, when we use the term procurement card policy, that is the name of the policy that Sandag staff uses. So it just try not to get it confused with the purchase cards, which is the actual cards they use, if that makes sense. So the procurement card policy does not address any of the following: delegation of signature authority, email approval of transaction logs, and payments through alternative payment service providers, think PayPal or things like that. We also noted that training on the policy was quite minimal and that personal charges can remain undetected. We noted that there was over 800 transactions that occurred on weekends and holidays. Weekends and holiday transactions are not inherently disallowed within the policy or just in general. We noted them because they're of high risk, and so we took a sample of 123 weekend transactions and 41 holiday transactions. The holiday transactions did include unofficial holidays such as Black Friday and Cyber Monday, as those are high-risk transaction days, as you could imagine. So we found that 18 of those combined 164 sample transactions were missing one or more proper forms of support. 12 transactions that were unallowable, with the majority, but based on the policy, with the majority of them occurring at San Diego area restaurants. And 4 transactions did have proper support, but they could be considered unreasonable based on what they were for and or the price. We had 4 recommendations for this finding. The OAPA recommends that any delegate who approves purchases or transaction logs receive training on the procurement card policy and the approver's responsibilities. We recommend that procurement card policies prohibit the approval of transaction logs by email or mandate that all supporting documentation be available digitally to the approver. This policy can allow approvers to designate a permanent alternative approver or temporary delegate who is trained on the policy and approver responsibilities to review and sign the transaction logs. We recommend that the Finance Department develop a training session for Sandag procurement card policies. A session should include examples of improper use of purchase cards to make the training more relevant and comprehensible to the card holder. These sessions can be recorded and reviewed at the card holder's convenience. And our last recommendation is that we recommend that the Finance Department develop a policy on Sandag's use of popular merchant accounts, such as Amazon for business purposes, and to reduce the number of these accounts to the lowest possible number. Finance may also consider establishing corporate accounts with some of the more popular merchants, through which all of Sandag's businesses purchases are funneled in order to reduce the chance of inadvertent or intentional personal purchases. Our second finding was that the procurement card policy is not consistently followed. In an initial sample of 44 transactions, auditors found 3 cases where the transaction log was not signed by the approver. Auditors noted transactions where there were not receipts of goods of purchases or other proper supporting documentation. We noted that 34 transactions over the 30,500 limit, where there's an individual purchase card, there's an individual transaction limit to how much that could be spent that's outlined in the procurement card policy, which is 3,500. And so We found 34 transactions in the entire population that were over 3,500, along with 3 potential split purchases to circumvent that 3,500 limit. And according to SANDAG's procurement card policy, the aggregate purchase amount should not exceed the micro purchase threshold, 3,500, which was 3,500 until June of last year for a vendor per fiscal year. This meaning that if staff uses purchase cards at a particular vendor, the total of the amount spent at that single vendor through purchase card should not exceed 3,500 in a fiscal year. Well, now it's 10,000 as the micro purchase threshold was increased. But we found 106 instances among 61 vendors where more than 3,500 was spent in a single fiscal year. We had just one recommendation for this finding, and we recommend strict enforcement of the procurement card policy provisions. The finance department should track non-compliance by cardholders and develop a mechanism for highlighting such non-compliance. A monthly listing to the executive director of cardholders who submitted their reconciliations after the deadline is an example of such a mechanism. Additionally, a quarterly report to the board of directors and or the audit committee of non-compliance would exhibit accountability and transparency. There we go. Our third finding was auditors noted improper, questionable, and unallowable purchases. We found a total of $69,130 spent at local restaurants and food establishments within, when we say local, we mean San Diego area. We found purchases for gift cards, including 5 $100 gift cards that did not have a complete explanation on the transaction logs. We found 29 transactions out of a sample of 369 for utilities, memberships, and other unallowable purchases. And SANDAG held a staff retreat in downtown San Diego hotel in December 2019, and these costs were charged to federal, state, and local funds, the breakdown of which is in the report that we can provide if needed. This finding had a lot of recommendations, I believe 9. Our first recommendation is the finance department should disallow the practices of purchasing meals at local establishments immediately, and the procurement card policy should be revised explicitly to reflect this prohibition. The finance department should tally all improper purchase card charges and seek reimbursement of the amount from the responsible cardholders. SANDAG should refrain from issuing purchase cards to individual cardholders and instead reimburse them for expenses. In cases where employees are unwilling or unable to bear the financial burden of paying with their personal funds for work-related purposes, SANDAG can advance funds or pay through a departmental card. Our fourth recommendation was the finance department should evaluate any tax compliant issues that resulted from the purchase of meals for employees and board members at local restaurants. This entails tallying total payments for select individuals and making any required reports to the IRS. Individual recipients of paid meals should also be notified and advised to consult with their own tax advisors if they were not SANDAG employees. The SANDAG General Counsel should evaluate the implication of paid meals to board members and any inadvertent violations of FPPC regulations and necessary filings. Covered individuals should be notified and also consult with their own ethics advisors. The procurement card policy should be amended to explicitly prohibit the purchase of gift cards. Seventh recommendation was that the CFO should examine this transaction and contact the relevant funding agencies for advice. SANDAG should reimburse any funds that are deemed unallowable. The board of directors may want to consider creating a board policy that provides allowability of some of these transactions with the understanding of the risk associated with allowing for activity that is considered unallowable by federal and state funding agencies. And lastly, a monthly or quarterly listing provided to the audit committee or the board of directors of cardholders and transactions by users would be a good system control to put in place to encourage adherence to the policies and exhibit accountability and transparency. Our final finding was that we found purchases of both hardware and software using purchase cards. Though not explicitly disallowed by SANDAG's policy, hardware and software purchases pose a risk of violating the 3,500 limit as those type of purchases tend to be very expensive. In March of 2020, like when we all were sent home due to COVID, $178,777 was spent over the course of 4 transactions using purchase cards for laptops and devices necessary to work from home. Auditors, we also found multiple examples of software and hardware purchases exceeding the 3,500 limit. We want to note that other governmental agencies prohibit the use of purchase card for hardware and software purchases for these reasons. And our recommendation is that Sandag should revise its procurement card policy to limit or restrict payment for information technology, hardware, or software to the lowest level possible. We'd like to state that Sandag management provided a response and an agreement with the audit findings. Management response and prepared a response and prepared a corrective action plan addressing the report recommendations and are attached to the report. The OIPA will work with management to ensure that the corrective action plan is reviewed on a quarterly basis and actions noted are implemented. This concludes our presentation, and we'll take questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. I think, did Andre want to make a quick comment? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, on behalf of Sandag Management, I'd like to thank the cooperation that Mary Kay, Lloyd, and Michael have given to us through this audit. So the audit did result, as Michael mentioned, in 16 recommendations for consideration by Sandag Management. And management intends to address the proposed recommendations as part of the agency's commitment to continued improvement and to support the highest level of organizational performance. So as we just demonstrated in the prior compensation audit that we presented, we are committed to improving processes and procedures and providing clarity to agency credit card holders and ensuring that there are appropriate controls as well as consistency in the administration of the P-card program. As Michael mentioned, management has prepared an action plan that is attached to this report and outlining how we'll address the findings. In general, there are two primary activities. First of all, revising the current P-card policy and related processes and procedures. We expect this to be completed by April of this year. The next is ensuring that staff assigned agency credit cards, as well as those authorizing to approve transactions, are fully trained and understand their obligations and responsibilities. We expect this phase to be completed by end of June. So the work is currently underway and management has already started on the action plan. Now, maybe Mary did provide us with a number of samples from other agencies similar to Sandag. And so we are going to be basically looking at those to update our existing policies and procedures. Also, a multidisciplinary team representing various areas of subject matter expertise has been engaged in this, including our finance team, our legal team, our contracts and risk management team. And as noted, the team is focused on, again, clarifying roles and responsibilities, defining acceptable uses of the P-card, improving internal controls used for P-card administration, clarifying consequences for misuse or abuse of their privileges. So we intend to engage Mary and our team to help us review the draft of our new policies and practices, and we'll be bringing regular progress updates first to the audit committee, followed to the board. So to conclude, management team firmly believes that continuous improvement is important for the agency and again appreciates ongoing support and collaboration by OIPA. We share the mutual goal of organizational efficiency, transparency, and success, and look forward to collaborating in response to the purchase card audit. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I had one clarifying question. So there was a recommendation that it be disallowed to buy computers and software on the credit card. And I was just curious, how did we recommend we buy computers and software, if not on the credit card, the Sandag credit cards?
Well, typically, as we talked about, there's a line of $3,500 limit. But typically when you're buying software and equipment or any type of IT, you have an open purchase order or an open contract with various individuals that's already been vetted. There's more controls around it. They can quickly purchase it through that process. So there really isn't a need to go and purchase almost $200,000 on a purchase card.
Right.
And in doing that, you're also giving this appearance by splitting them up to kind of avoid that credit card policy of $3,500 transactions. And it gives the appearance of, that you're trying to basically get over or bypass the policies of the procuring, which is not good as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Okay, let's see, do we have any comments in the boardroom here? Yes, Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to Mary Kay's team. This was your office of the Office of the Independent Auditor was brought about through AB 805. It was to provide additional checks and balances. So we as a board, when we're approving funds, when we're looking forward as to what and how we prioritize our budgets and our actions, we have that accountability. This shows, just this item alone shows that AB 805 is working. The checks and balances are working. Nothing nefarious, nothing done with malice intent, nothing done to undermine the organization, but there wasn't a policy in place. And we were in a pandemic. So that those two combinations alone allows for the process to show that it works. And I really want to thank Mary Kay and her team, as well as the Sandag staff, to say, you know what can we do to improve? That's how we grow our organizations. That's how we become better, and how we keep accountability, not only to our constituents, the ones that vote us in, but the regional constituents who really see us as the leaders to keeping things above board and making sure that people follow policy. So thank you. And I believe this is for approval. And I will move approval again with all of the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Mary Kay and your team, proving once again the value of an independent auditor on both this item and the previous item. It's so critically important. And I'm so grateful that management has agreed to all the recommendations. That's really a key step. Inspired by Mayor Minto's personal story, when I was in private practice, I had a client that would review our monthly invoices, and the tens of thousands of dollars of hourly billings, he'd approve right away. But he would look at our expenses, which were maybe a few $100, and really drill down on us on where those were. His strategy was obvious. And so if we think of the public as our client, it is so critical that we deal with these forthrightly and get these behind us, because not only is it critical in terms of establishing our credibility, but it's a distraction from the real business that we're trying to do. So I'm so grateful that management did the independent audit, work through this. The management has agreed to this. There's a plan, and it's a pretty timely plan coming back in April for portions, and then the end of June is really terrific. I just had one clarifying question. When the independent auditor did your work, you sampled to discover some patterns. Management said they were going to look at transactions. Are you going to look at all the transactions to discover whether anything needs to be dealt with, or just the ones that were sampled?
I think right now, giving the audit, and again, I want to thank Mary and her team, giving the audit, we're going to look at all of our procedure to make sure that we're transparent. Obviously, we're accepting all the finding. We need controls. That's the whole idea of why this is, like Mayor Sotelo-Solis said, this is important for an agency like our staff. So we are going to look at everything, especially, I mean, there's things to be done immediately giving the audit, but when the plan is completed, we're going to make sure you're comfortable with to move forward.
Great, thank you. And that concludes my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Zito.
Yes, thanks. And I'd like to start out by saying thanks, Michael, for the detailed presentation and the great information. And sorry I wasn't able to do this at the audit committee, but I really appreciate having you on board and doing the good work you're doing. So thank you for that. I also wanted to note that this is another audit which has identified a substantive and notable risk, and we did come up with a plan a couple of years ago about appropriate staffing for the auditor's office, and haven't been able to implement that. But I believe we're at a time when, as we go forward with the budget process, we're going to be trying to get there by growing things a little bit. And I would just encourage this board to support that, because we are clearly identifying real changes that need to occur to make sure that we're the best organization that we can be. So I would appreciate that as the budget items come forward, that we are able to be supportive of what the auditor office is looking for. I also note with this particular audit, Hassan may remember when we had the salaries and compensation audit, I was expressed a little bit of disappointment in the timeline for how long it was going to take to do all the corrective actions, and it would be on his case to try and improve and pull those up. And downside is we didn't pull anything up. The good side is we are getting them done. We're getting them done well and on time. But I was happy to see in this one that the corrective actions are being done very quickly relative to our previous audit. And that's really good to see. And I'd like to thank staff for that because it is important. And I'm glad to see that we're able to accommodate that. So with that, thanks everybody. And it's great to see the collaborative effort ongoing.
Thank you. I neglected to call on the public comments first, so I wanted to go to the clerk and ask if we have any.
Do we have?
Sorry about that, Chair. We do have one member of the public with their hand up, Natalie Cortez. You're self-muted at the moment, and you can begin whenever you're ready. Natalie, I'm so sorry, but we can't unmute you. So if you can go ahead and do that on your Zoom camera, and then you can start your comments. All right, sorry, Chair, she's put her hand down, so I think we can move forward. There are no other public comments.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you so much. First, I just really want to thank the team for your great work. Obviously, it's such paramount importance that we are protecting public monies and making sure that they're being spent for the public benefit. And this is really, really vital. I just had a clarifying question. It was a very thorough kind of spot check of any potential violation of existing procedures and recommendations regarding changing those safeguards. I was just wondering if we found any actual purchases that actually were improper or not in this process. I know we found ones that violated procedures, but I'm wondering if you found any ones that were actually any purchases that were actually for personal use in violation of our legal constraints or what we actually should be spending money on as a public agency.
I can respond to that. Thank you for the question. It's hard for us to officially or define 100% that there was not or that there was. And the reason for that is some of the expenditures lacked support. So an example would be a lunch or a dinner that had a receipt, but no other information: who attended, what was the meeting for, what was the purpose of the meeting, was there a business purpose? Well, then that would be really difficult for us to say one way or the other if it was appropriate or not appropriate, because there was not enough information to determine. So, that's why we kind of stayed away from defining it further and just stating that truly, as in other audits we've done, and Hassan is aware of this too, is there just is a lack of documentation that needs to happen in the organization overall. And I think that's where we're at with that one.
That's very helpful. That's what I had gathered from the presentation, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's very unclear as to whether we actually have personal expenses that may have ended up happening or not. It's $2.5 million that we're talking about over a 4-year period. And the fact that we have an 8% small sample, or a small sampling, and 8% of those are shown to be unallowable purchases because of lack of following the protocols and violating the policy. That is concerning to me. There are, all of these things that were happening on the weekends and holidays. I feel like we need more information. I don't feel like there is enough information as far as, and maybe the auditor can clear this up, as far as, there being a mix of, I read something in a memo that she had sent, the use of the color of money and it being a mixture of federal, state, and local, that's difficult to go back to determine because the funds were commingled. I feel like we should be
far more careful on this, and I'm not sure how that would actually happen. I do believe we should follow every single recommendation that our auditor has suggested for us, because I think that's really important, because we do need solid, responsible fiscal policy in place to clear rules so that we don't have this happening any longer. And I don't know if this is possible. Maybe our auditor could also answer this, and that is, if we've got these things where we think there might have been fraud or abuse, how do we recoup that money if it was used for personal purposes? Because I can tell you this, I don't have personally a city credit card. I know there was some discussion a few years ago where there were people that were applying for reimbursement on driving. However, they were already getting paid elsewhere. And so I just want to make sure that we are following everything we can possibly follow as far as creating the right policies, making sure that those policies are completely followed, and making sure that any time that has not happened, that we are recouping those dollars back, because it just, this is taxpayer money. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't. I mean, when you're talking about like 60, I think there was like $60,000 that was used for restaurants locally, which shouldn't have happened, I don't believe, in many cases. And some of them could be even drinking alcohol. I think we need more information on that. I don't know if that's possible to get that. So maybe our auditor could answer some of those questions.
Sure. So it's difficult, and I think that's where the policy moving forward has to happen. It has to be detailed. It can't be too general. It has to have really strict controls in place. There's recommendations where, in some cases for a business need, lunches and dinners and stuff can occur. But when they occur, they have to be for a business purpose. They have to be fully documented, who was there, what was the subject matter, to assure that there's no Brown Act violation. All of this stuff must happen. And so having a policy that states what must, if this is going to be permitted, what must then join that for documentation, a receipt that's detailed, not a summarized receipt. If you hit on the alcoholic beverages, the problem with that is, yes, we found, several transactions that showed the merchant code is alcoholic. The problem is some restaurants, depending on where you go to, will put a merchant code that's alcohol when it's not. It's a soda that they get from a bar. So it looks like it's alcohol, but it's not in fact alcohol. And if you don't have the detailed receipt, it's hard to say it was, or it's hard to say it wasn't. When you're, the best way to conquer this is, again, controls. I've spoke with other special districts within the area, and how they manage this is there's typically at the beginning of the year, there's a budget set aside as a line item budget that's permissible for employee enrichment, executive, meetings that involve lunches or dinners. And there's a certain amount that's kind of transparent and accountable, set aside in a line item in the budget. And only the executive director has control over that card. And so any gift cards that are purchased through employee enrichment and all that, it's all done through that top layer there. And then there's a quarterly report that has to be submitted to the board and the audit committee that shows the detail of what those expenses were for and how much it was for, because we want to make sure we're being good stewards. So if you take someone out to dinner or lunch and it is a legitimate lunch or dinner, it has to be reasonable, right? It can't be unreasonable. The amount can't be, thousands of dollars when it should have only been a couple of hundred because you had so many people. So these things are about, the appearance. We always want to make sure what the appearance is. And so doing these things can really help negate the possibility of even a question of, is there misappropriate or inappropriate use? Another struggle, again, is around those merchant codes. A lot of other, like Yolo County, they have a lot of restriction on merchant codes. So you can't even on your purchase card if it's under a certain merchant code, you can't even purchase using your purchase card because it puts a barrier on that ability from the get-go. So there's a lot of controls that can be put in place to prevent anything from occurring. And then the other end is just good system controls and good tracking and documentation. When you're going to give gift cards or buy gift cards, there has to be custody, a chain of custody. Who purchased them, for what, and then when they're dispersed, who are they dispersed to, and for what reason? And so it's just, again, good inventory, good tracking, and that can only really happen moving forward. The color of money, again, we're now aware that a federal and state money, especially around federal funding, it's inappropriate, these types of transactions. They don't allow for them. But some local funds would allow for it. So we just want to make sure that when we're having these expenditures, we're identifying the color of money and that it's the appropriate color of money.
So follow-up question on that. Are you satisfied with the policies that you have suggested and that SANDAG staff has agreed to follow? Do you feel like we're going to be able to get everything that we need to truly be completely transparent and able to move forward in a way that will instill confidence?
I provided several examples, and I think that they are incorporating those into a new policy and updating their policy. There's some other examples is sometimes under the purchase card, it is very understandable and reasonable and really a good control to allow for memberships to be purchased through the purchase card, to allow for certain things that we did not allow for in our current policy that are really actually control set if you do allow for those. So it kind of goes both ways. So once they complete the policy, I'll definitely look at it. I'll make additional recommendations. And then hopefully, like with the last corrective action plan, we can come together as a team and produce, what needs to be produced to ensure moving forward things are better. And also a continuous auditing plan. So just so you know, next fiscal year, we're moving into a continuous auditing plan, which is we're not just walking away from the transactions and saying, well, then we're going to trust that they're following what they're. This is a high risk inherently for any government agency. So we are going to be on a continuous basis auditing around transactions, randomly selecting transactions and checking to see that they're doing, in fact, what they're supposed to be doing around policies that they incorporate. We're going to be doing that with both purchase card and contracts for that matter.
And that will be in effect exactly when?
The new fiscal year starts June or July 1st. So we'll have the audit plan about a month before that go to the audit committee, and that will just be our sole focus, especially the size of the team we have. The best bang for your buck is a continuous auditing. So we're just constantly and randomly selecting high risk areas to audit and auditing based on that.
Yeah, I definitely like that plan. I'm just wondering if we should curtail some of the activity on the credit cards in the meantime to set forth, setting us up for that, because I do believe that will work and that's a sound policy. So I'm wondering if it's possible that we, I know we've got like 20 cards out there right now. I'm wondering if it's possible, and maybe our executive director might be able to weigh in on this. I'm not certain who to ask. I'm not sure if it would be our auditors team, but would it be possible to have just a few cards out there in the interim so that we are able to get a better handle on this, and we can make sure that we are not allowing any of, because an 8% unallowed purchases is high to me. I mean, it might not be high in the big picture of $2.5 million, but in the big picture, anything that is being misused is not good, in my opinion, being that it's taxpayer money, and specifically even Transnet. So my question would be, is it possible, Hassan, for you to either only use your credit card or maybe a handful, so maybe 5 or less in the interim until this policy is in full effect? Or is it possible for you to look over all of the transactions and work with Mary's office to make sure that we are in, before the policy is actually in effect,
that we are still following the policy, even though, because I think the board really would want that, something like that. I know I would personally.
Thank you, Mayor Jones, and I'll let Andre answer, but I just want to, a couple of things to your point. Some of these recommendations, and Mayor Zito alluded to it, we're accepting the finding because we want more controls. Some of them has already started. In terms of the credit card, I'll let Andre address the reducing the numbers or how we do the numbers. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Jones, for the question. So, you know, part of why we're coming back a lot sooner in April, as opposed to maybe the comp audit was a little bit longer, because we are taking this serious. And I think one of the things that we are doing is we are going to limit, currently, I believe there's 16 cards outstanding. We're going to reduce that amount to 6. Basically, each major department will be having one with the director responsible for it. So it's just taking us maybe a month or so to implement those changes, reviewing the credit limits that we can put on each one of those. So we are actually doing what you're recommending.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And also, Mary Jones, I mean, obviously Mary will is independent and she can tell you whether she's satisfied or not when we move. But I like one of the recommendation, once we decide how we do this, is to report to the board of directors every quarter to give you a list of things that happen, so to make sure you're comfortable in how we're moving forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Hall. Mayor Hall, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of my questions have already been asked, but you know, the very simple question is, when you pass out a credit card, what do? Just give them a credit card, or are they given guidelines? I cannot believe an agency with this kind of status in the community and credibility just hands out a credit card and is not given some sort of parameters of what you can and can't do with it.
I can respond to that. I agree, and that's one of the major findings, and I think recommendations, and I think that management agrees, is just a lack of training. I think one of the highest importance is training. Like I said in the prior discussion, when you have a policy, it's great to have a policy and it can have everything wonderful in the policy, but if nobody knows the policy exists and what's expected of them in the policy, then it's kind of useless. So the major thing here is that once the policy comes in, it's going to be read and understood by everyone, and then anyone that's a card holder will have to go through, I think, annual is what we discussed, training on their understanding of their responsibility and accountability of that card, and what could occur if they even use it on a personal basis.
And you used the word personal basis, and it was also part of the original presentation about personal basis. How much money was tracked to personal basis?
As I shared with Mayor Jones, it's hard to determine because of the lack of documentation in some cases. So we couldn't say that it was personal. We couldn't say that it was business because there was just too much lacking information. A big example is there's a lot of things that are purchased on Amazon. Well, the problem with Amazon is everything's titled Amazon Books, but not everything is a book from Amazon, or we have a lot of books floating around Sandag. So that's a merchant problem, right? How merchants code things. So that's where we have to kind of take some control, make sure it doesn't happen.
So just while we have it on record and on film, how many credit cards are currently or were there given out?
I think that for the audit period, it varied from anywhere between, I believe, 15 to 20. And then this period, there were 16, and I think they're in the process of reducing those to down to 6.
Okay. Well, I would just say, management, you really dropped the ball on this one. Anytime you're dealing with public funds and we find out that after a period of time, this much money can't be accounted for, that doesn't say much for this establishment's leadership. And I'll let it go at that.
Okay, Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an opportunity to move forward with better practices. It is concerning to me that it got to this level. You know, as elected officials, if we misuse our credit cards on our campaigns, we get fined, we can go to jail. It's serious. And we saw that, you know, with the congressman from East County. At the very least, the common sense should tell an employee that if they make it to the front page of the UT, it's not going to be a happy outcome. And it's not going to, if you're thinking in terms of this board, it's not going to make us happy, it's going to make us sad. And I don't want to stop people from doing their jobs, but certainly on the credit card charges that involved meals that were business, I have a schedule. I put the names of the people I'm meeting with on my schedule. I don't know if the auditor requested that people go back and look at their schedules and pull the meetings that they were having and with whom they were having. At the very least, we should be able to accomplish that. And if they don't have a schedule that shows who they're meeting with, then perhaps they should pony up that money and reimburse this agency. Because if you can't prove that you had a business meeting, it's a personal meeting, and you're talking about too much money. So I hate to be so harsh, but there's a lot of things that we argue over. Transparency should not be one of them. And thank God we had an auditor who did an outstanding job and that this didn't end up on the front page of the UT.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, I would just like to echo those claims. I mean, this is taxpayer funds. It's completely unacceptable. I understand we're moving in the right direction, but it needs to be very clear that if the meetings were not tangible business meetings, they were personally used and abused, that needs to be fully refunded. And, you know, there needs to be consequences from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no further comments, we have a motion and a second on the table. So let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall. I'm sorry, Mayor Hall, could you repeat yourself for me? I'll come back to Mayor Hall. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas. I will come back for the City of Chula Vista. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
For the City of Del Mar, Councilmember Gasterland.
Yes.
For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
The City of Escondido is absent. The City of Imperial Beach is absent. For the City of La Mesa, Vice Mayor Shu.
La Mesa, aye.
For the
I'm
City
still
of
at my house, I'm leaving shortly.
For the City of Lemon Grove, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, yes.
For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss. I'll come back for the City of Poway. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember LaCava.
LaCava, yes.
For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
For the City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
For the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Yes.
And the City of Chula Vista is absent.
She's back in. She's in.
Oh, she's back. My apologies. Mayor Salas, could you repeat your vote for the record, please? I believe the City of Chula Vista is absent. So with that.
Mayor Voss.
Oh, for the City of Poway, Mayor Voss. Mayor Voss is not with us, so the City of Poway is absent. And that item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Okay, thank you. So the next thing we have is closed session. So for those who are in the room who are board members, please stay here. And if you're joining virtually, then please log into the closed session Zoom link. And then we will then open up this room here for our report out at the end. So we'll just give a minute to transition here and make sure we have a quorum.
As we transition to closed session, can we verify there are no public comments regarding closed session?
Yes, let's call for public comments regarding closed session. We have none according to Tessa.
There are no hands up.
Or sorry, our Sandag attorney. Or our outside counsel attorney.
Sandag attorney. Hello. So as to item 11 on the agenda, the board was briefed on the reference litigation, and there's no reportable action.
I will note for the record that the city of San Diego recused themselves and did not participate in the closed session briefing.
Well, let's see. We are going to adjourn, and our next meeting is, what is the date of it? Somebody know? March 25th. Our next board meeting is Friday, March 25th at 9 a.m., and I hope to see all of you here. Thank you. Yes.
Can I make a board member comment just really quick before we adjourn?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share screen for it, and I hope this will be really easy.
Good to see you.
Here we are. Okay, this is a graphic that I just wanted to walk you through because many have received it. It's actually not showing up properly. Okay, so here's the top. Del Mar Bluff, the accidents versus the NCTD fence. This is showing where we've been talking with NCTD and Del Mar about fencing. It's the very south end of town. And this bar graph right here shows where all the incidents have happened on the tracks for the last 10 years. And it illustrates vividly that where the incidents are happening is nowhere near where the fencing is planned. And Del Mar remains fully willing, ready, and able to indemnify NCTD for any incidents related to public use of the Upper Bluff Coastal Trail where fence is indicated here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we are officially adjourned again. Thank you.
So we'll go up to date.